but it's one of those exercises that some people can have fear with, some people can perform poorly, and some people just don't have the confidence with. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take some of my learnings from a recent course that I did with Prescript. I'm going to link that below, and basically go through some of the key cues that you want to internalize when you are performing a deadlift. It's going to help you stay safe, stay confident, and perform this lift as effectively as possible. That being said, I've had to unlearn some of the things that I used to do in my deadlift, and so those things that I used to do wrong, I'm going to correct in this, and these might be some corrections that you need to make. Let's get into it. So when we're setting up for the deadlift, the bar stays still and we're going to manipulate our body all around it. That's going to ensure that we're just staying really focused on the body and the positions that it should be in. First thing that we want to do is set our stance. Now, before I go into this, just to make something clear at the start, everyone's deadlift is going to look completely different. And I'm very sure that my deadlift is going to look very different to yours because I have very long femurs. And that means that my deadlift is essentially an RDL, which means I'm going to do something slightly differently in my setup, but I'll explain along the way. If you've got shorter femurs, that means that you're going to be able to keep your spine a little bit more upright. We don't want it to be completely upright, otherwise we're doing an upside down squat and we're not training the muscles that we want to train. But we do want to just be aware of those differences. So I'm going to talk through those as well. Imagine you're going to jump, okay? So set yourself up for a jump. Whichever position that you find yourself strongest in to jump, that's typically where you want to be for your deadlift stance, okay? Don't overthink it. Just be as natural as possible. Just pretend you're going to jump, and then that's where you want to set your stance. Now, once you've done that, where do we position the bar? We want the bar to be over the middle of the foot. Now, this is going to be something that I do slightly differently. Because I hinge a lot more and I don't have that good ankle mobility. We can get into the whys on that in a minute. It's purely structural in my case, I know that for a fact. But because I don't have more ankle mobility, I set a little bit further forwards. I set quite close to the bar because I basically just need to hinge as much as possible, and I know my knees aren't going to travel forward so much. However, most of you set the bar just over the middle of the foot, and we're talking literally the middle of the foot. So that's going to be kind of like over the middle of my laces here. And the reason why we want to do that is because when we start to go through the next parts of the setup, there's going to be a portion where we push the knees in. And it's that point where we push the knees in. I mean, when I do that now, my shins don't touch the bar, which is why I need to be closer. But we're going to push the knees in, so the shins touch the bar, and then that's where we execute the deadlift from. So before I go down and set my grip, I like to reinforce the position that I'm going to finish with. So I just want to talk about some of those points now. First thing that I want to talk through is the position of your shoulders. Now, we don't want to be in a fully retracted position. This is something that you might think, oh, that sounds a bit different. It certainly was for me. But you don't want to be in this position here, shoulders back and down. What you do want is just the shoulders down. So keep your shoulders in their natural plane, which is scaption. And from there, we're actually, if we push the shoulders down, we're actually engaging the lats in a much stronger position than if we come back here, because now the lats are fully shortened is typically weaker. So that's one thing, strong lat position, arms straight down. So that's where you finish it. Now, the other thing that you might not have considered with this is when we have the arms going straight down like so, I've actually made my arms kind of longer. Here, they're essentially shorter when fully retracted. Here, they're longer. What does that mean? It means that we've actually reduced the distance from the bar to the top position. Here, a few more inches, more work. Here, a little less work. And from a performance perspective, it's going to be much better to finish in the most efficient place possible, which is arms straight down. So if I actually show you that, I'm not going to go through the proper setup. I'm just going to pick this up. That's where I want to finish, like so, okay? Not here, all right? And even when I'm here, I'm feeling this in my lumbar spine a bit as well. So we don't want to compress those, we don't want to compress the lumbar too much, and we don't want to excessively flex it. We just want to be in this position here. So one more thing to mention with that as well is that we want to reinforce the natural curvature of the spine. Again, something that you might think, this sounds a bit strange, but we want the upper back to be slightly rounded, which is the kyphotic posture. We don't want to fight against the natural position of the spine because, again, we're just going to be expending more energy in keeping certain positions that don't serve us during the deadlift. So if I just show you what this looks like, that top position, I'm not going to go through the setup too much because this is super light. Stand up with it, and then from here, note that arms are straight down, pelvis is neutral, rib cage is stacked, strong position, and that means that my spine is in natural kyphotic position. Rather than all the way up here, I've had to pull it up a few more inches. My pelvis is at neutral now. Arching the back means my rib cage flares, so weaker position, and I'm shaking more, right? So that's where you want to finish. So once we've reinforced that position at the top, what we want to do is take a nice deep breath into the rib cage, expand the rib cage, because you're going to be in a much better position to do that here than when you're down, flex. So breathe into the rib cage. Then we're going to hinge down. So drive the hips back and then grab the bar. Now, when it comes to grabbing the bar, in terms of width, just go straight down to whatever your shoulder girdle allows you to do. We don't want to go too wide. We don't want to go too narrow. Just straight down. That's going to be the best position for you to engage the lats. I like to push the inside of my thumbs right into the bar, okay? So we're pushing right down. Then I like to just rotate the elbows back towards the room, and then I'm just making sure I'm really pushing the bar down, like so. So setting my grip. I am not bringing my shoulder blades down the back for the reason that I mentioned when we come to standing up and looking at the deadlift. We don't want our shoulder blades down the back, so we're just reaching straight down. Now, in terms of grip, you're going to notice I've got a double overhand grip. Typically, I would do a mixed grip. That's usually my strongest position, but if I'm coaching a beginner, always this way, just because I don't want to encourage any asymmetries right at the start, and purely because it's not a performance thing right at the start of learning the lift. It's more of just making sure that we're hinging effectively and we're doing so in a manner that ensures some kind of symmetry, or the best symmetry that we can achieve for that person throughout the body. And that's typically not going to happen with a mixed grip. But when it comes to performance, choose your strongest grip and go for it. So I've taken my shoes off because I need to demonstrate something that's going to help me explain why I've had to unlearn something that I used to do. And the thing that I'm unlearning is pushing my knees out at the bottom. I used to think that was the best position to create tension. However, what we want at the bottom of the deadlift, the thing that's going to help you to extend out at the bottom of the deadlift is actually your adductors. If we push the knees out, we are not going to be able to utilize the adductors because we've essentially already shortened them. So we need to keep some length in them. Now, this does not mean that we need to push the knees together and in. We just need to keep them in a fairly neutral position. So how best to do that? I've taken my shoes off just to demonstrate this. We don't want our foot to be kind of supinated, which is where we're creating what's called a tripod foot. We actually don't want that. We want to flatten the foot into the floor as much as possible to create as much of a base of support as we can. This kind of takes it away. Now, the other thing that this does is, as I supinate the foot, it pushes the knee out, which is the thing that I just mentioned that we don't want to do if we want to load the adductors. So we keep the feet flat. So if I just get into that position now, I'm thinking about flattening my feet and pushing the big toes into the floor, and I'm not really focused on my knees at all. They just stay where they are. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to stay limp and go like this. I'm still keeping some kind of tension through the body, but I'm not excessively pushing out like so, taking my adductors out of the equation, which are going to be the thing that's going to help me to explode out of the lift. So now that we understand grip, feet, we need to figure out how to stand up. The deadlift is purely a concentric lift, which means that there's no loading before the explode. So what we try and do is we try and create our own load to explode, i.e. we create our own eccentric. And the way to do that is, once we're in the positions that I've just talked about, so set my grip, I've engaged my lats, feet pushing down into the floor, keeping as much pressure there as possible. I'm going to send my hips back and knees back away, and then I'm just going to push my hips down and knees in, like so, and the chest is going to come up slightly, and then once I've created that eccentric, that's when I'm going to be ready to power up, okay? So create your own eccentric by just sending the hips back, knees back, push down straight into the feet, and then we're going to be ready to execute the next part of the deadlift. So after we've created our own eccentric, push into the bar, we need to think about execution. So what I do there is hips back, down, and then here I'm just going to pull the slack out of the bar by just pulling the bar up slightly, and you'll hear it click against the plates. So slack is pulled out. Once the slack is pulled out, that's my trigger to brace. So once I've done that, that's going to be my trigger to brace, which is essentially me pulling air into the torso and just expanding out as much as possible, creating a nice rigid cylinder that's not going to let any energy escape during the lift. And then once I've braced, I'm going to stand up by pushing my feet into my upper back, extending, and I'll finish with that slightly kyphotic posture, hands down, as I mentioned. So let me just show you what that looks like. Here, click, brace, push. Once we've executed the deadlift, we've got to the top. I think it's very important, if you're a beginner, to perform the eccentric nice and slowly. So that's going to improve your body awareness, improve your understanding of what you should be doing in the lift, improve your understanding of the mechanics of the hinge and where to keep tension. I think that's really important. And to be honest with you, that's something that I try and still do now. I think when I'm going through like a deadlift phase and improving my strength, and I focus on the eccentric, it just allows me to get a lot stronger, and typically it has done. So how to do the eccentric? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go straight up because this isn't too heavy. What I'm focusing on is just braking at the hips and the bar going straight down and just keeping the ribcage stacked. They're the things that we need to happen. So ribcage stays stacked, braking at the hips, 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 hips. Bar goes straight down. Now, as I was braking at the hips, for me, because I have really long femurs and my deadlift is more of an RDL, for you this might not work so well. Going straight down with a hinge. You're probably going to get to the top of your hinge, somewhere below the knee, at which point you can sit down and let the knees drive forwards. But for me, it's literally RDL all the way down. So if I'll show you that, pretending I've got shorter femurs and normal proportions of a human being, we're going to go from here, hinge, and as I hinge, I've just created a bit of space between the bar and my thighs. It goes straight down to under my knees. At that point, you might feel the stretch in the hamstrings, and then just sit down with it before you go into the next rep. Brace, stand up. And so that's how you perform your deadlift. Now, let me just show you what that looks like in real time without any of the chat.